What's up everyone, I'm Severingo, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Season of Discovery video. I'm currently in the process of making PvE and PvP guides for Rogue and Druid as well as my Mage, but about 20 minutes ago my guild and I tied the world number 7 spot for speedrunning at 20 minutes and 15 seconds. So, I figured I'd tie in a lot of the stuff from my Feral Druid PvE guide here and explain both my own as well as my team's general strategy in real time as we go through this run. Let's jump right into it. The run doesn't start until you hit Grubbis, so you're allowed to do a little bit of pre-clearing as you see us doing here. For buffs, consumes, and important items, it was a bit of a doozy. For buffs, both Spark of Inspiration and Dark Moon Fair are essential. We also had some leftover mistletoe for the plus 20 spirit. When talking consumable and on-use items, for stat boosters, I had Elixirs of Lesser Agility and Ogre's Strength, though you can use Scroll of Strength 2 or 3 if you can find/afford them. Lesser Arcane Elixirs and Elixirs of Firepower for Hurricane AoE, although I didn't use it here. Dragon Breath Chili, and Oil of Immolation, which I tried to pop as often as possible when Powershifting as it helps when pulling big. Ferals can use lesser Wizard Oil on their weapon while still benefiting from Wild Strikes, and then I used an Elixir of Coalesced Regret, which gives you a flat +1 to all of your stats. Most of this is completely unnecessary for a normal run, but when you're speedrunning, everything counts. For the more defensive consumes, Rumsy Rum Black Label gives you 15 stamina. Nature Protection Pots can be helpful against certain boss mechanics like Electrocutioner, but my group decided that they aren't as necessary. Fire Protection Pots help against Menagerie and Thermaplugg, and Frost Protection can be pre-potted for Thermaplugg as well, but there are other ways of reducing that damage like Powershifting, using the Gnome Racial, or a free action potion. Speaking of free action potions, you can use them when starting Menagerie to burst the sheep down as much as you can prior to it casting Frayed Wiring to get a leg up on it before you have to swap targets. And then for the remaining general important items, you have your explosives. Goblin landmines are incredibly strong and account for a large portion of my overall damage. If you don't have engineering, you can use the easy throw version of the new engineering bombs. Advanced target dummies are pretty essential for handling bigger pulls or for moments when things get really sketchy. And for speedruns, swiftness and invisibility pots are huge for skipping certain packs, and in the same vein, the nifty stopwatch and gnomish cloaking device trinkets. We didn't do this in this run, but you can also use the gnomish parachute cloak for the jump down to the second boss and quickly swap back to prevent a large amount of raid-wide damage from fall damage. The only other thing I'll mention is I actually used the leftover student fodder on one occasion because they give a good amount of instant health and mana. Oh yeah, one last thing. If you're speedrunning and you have a mana bar, you're going to be mana starved a lot. So stockpile that water and learn how to drink walk. I explain how to do it in my flag carrying guide. It'll help you stay mobile while also regenerating mana. And on the topic of mana, I forgot to mention, bring a bunch of mana pots. I'm not going to speed anything up other than skipping past this upcoming part before we start, where we're talking in Discord about where to use certain items and it drags on a bit. So there will be many portions where I have said everything I want to say for the time being. I plan to incorporate timestamps, so if you want to skip around, be my guest. Otherwise, I'll just have the music and game volume running. Once all the trash was cleared in the front, it was time to buff up and unboon. The timer begins not when you start the event, nor when you hit the mobs prior to Grubbis, but the moment that someone hits Grubbis himself. This fight is quick, easy, and it also is super nice for melee because his armor is much lower than the last 4 bosses. Upon starting the event, waves of trogs will run through either side on a staggered basis. It does take a little bit for it to start, so just get comfortable. If you're a mana user, you can drink between waves, so don't worry about spending mana to kill these. Also, these don't count towards your parse. When the green gaseous clouds spawn, drag the mobs into it to have them all explode in one shot. When the boss arrives, as a Feral Druid, you're going to want to immediately cast one Mangle to get the debuff on the target and Rake, and then I maintain Savage Roar throughout the fight. At this point, cast any on-use effects that you want to use. I choose my 3-minute and 10-minute ones, which can all be macro to be used simultaneously, but just be mindful of your different cooldowns and choose which items you want to use in which fights accordingly. I then immediately pop Tiger's Fury and Berserk and begin shredding. At 5 combo points, use Rip, maintain Rake every 9 seconds, and then if the boss is about to die and you won't get the full value of Rip, you can try using a Ferocious Bite. Positioning can get a little bit wonky like it did here, and I'm not perfect, so I'm not ironclad with my rotation. But as a Feral, you should also be utilizing Powershifting, which I explain how to do in many of my previous PvP guides. Here I am drink walking as well. This is where you'd use the parachute cloak if you had one, but my team just ran off and jumped onto this lug nut here. Then it's immediately into clearing trash and trying to get to Viscous. We tank the boss close to this electric fence here because that's where we're going to be running out as soon as the boss goes down. As you'll see me doing a lot, because I have so little mana to work with, I don't like to shift out of certain forms at times. I stick in bear form for a decent amount because 1, I'm off tank, but 2, bear form does a decent amount of AoE damage. It has a lot more stamina and damage mitigation, and they buffed swipe, so it's not too bad. When the boss splits into 3 little guys that then turn into bigger guys, make sure your team is getting the kicks on the bigger guys because it shoots a really damaging damage over time disease. Otherwise, try to stay out of the sludge and just burn the boss.
Watch your feet. Watch your feet. Watch your pads.
Once this hallway has been pulled, this is where the Goblin Landmine comes into play. You'll see how much damage it does. And then also Oil of Immolation is very nice. On bigger packs like this, I also choose to use Berserk sometimes in bear form because it just allows us to get them down quicker. Trash, as opposed to bosses, is what typically kills you in a speedrun. When things got a little too crazy, some people had to use advanced target dummies, but once we got all of these to this platform/ramp here, you just throw down your goblin landmine, use your oil of immolation, and AoE him down. Coordinating who's using target dummies when is really, really important as well. Oh yeah, and also make sure you're cognizant of when things are running out. Things like Dragon Breath Chili are only 10 minutes, but they're so helpful in getting these big packs down, so just keep an eye on all of those things. When speedrunning, you'll typically have little to no downtime, so make sure you utilize every opportunity to drink or check your buffs. You'll be going headfirst into most pulls with whatever you have available at that time. If you're pretty much or don't have your big CDs, so be it. For Crowd Pummeler, all you have to do is keep an eye on his feet, like your Quentin Tarantino, and you do not want to be in front of his toes. Other than that, dodge the gears that spin around on the ground, and when he grabs someone random, your paladin can bop them or just try to burn and deal with it.
Shockwave. Shockwave.
Right here is when you're supposed to utilize your Gnomish Cloaking Device and Swiftness pots. We had some miscommunication, so we ended up just kind of trucking through this. There's also a trash requirement for all speedruns, and there's certain weak auras that allow you to track that. You don't really need to use the Gnomish Cloaking Device to do this skip here, but we just had them, so we just used them anyway. I'll go bear. I believe our main tank was summoning a minion here, so I went bear and tanked this next pack. Because there was a lot and swipe only hits 3 people, I just kind of popped berserk and went for it. Sorry for the screen shaking. For some reason, I feel that it makes my AoE hit more people. I don't know, it's just a bad habit. Group 1 on left side, group 2 on right. For Electrocutioner, the way that my group does it is have one group on the left-hand side of the boss, the other group on the right-hand side, and then our healers go behind those groups and just take turns being the furthest one away from the boss. When you have the tendrils, you bring it behind the boss where you still have enough range to melee him, but you're not going to be pulling people in. Obviously, we're not perfect and things can go awry, but it's an effective strategy that works very well. When you get knocked back, just go back into your positions, and it's the same thing till you down them.
Knocking back.
These Frostwalkers, similar to the witches in BFD, will cast Frost Nova when you hit them, so we just pulled this one all the way up so that we could start pulling more. You want to try to focus the arcane nullifiers down first. They have a spell reflect mechanic where they start glowing green, and similar to frayed wiring in the next boss, if they're near anyone else, everything else will start glowing green and also be spell reflecting. I've seen far too many warlocks and mages kill themselves because they weren't paying attention and either instant pyroblasted or chaos bolted, and it just reflected right back into their face. As I mentioned earlier, my group likes to focus the sheep down as much as possible before it casts frayed wiring. When it casts frayed wiring, make sure it's not close to any of the other bosses, because you'll end up having them also get it, which makes all of them not able to be hit. This is because they have a Thorns effect similar to the Lightning Totem on Lorgus Jet in BFD. As you could see, a lot of my melee team members used free action potions here. I wasn't able to because my pots were on cooldown, but it nullifies the stun you typically get from being close to the sheep. The squirrel casts a raid-wide interrupt/damaging ability. Make sure you guys are trying to kick that as much as possible. I believe our main tank had to hard summon a demon at the beginning of this fight, so it made things a little bit sketchy and we had to throw down a lot of advanced target dummies to maintain and save it. I think that's the closest we got to wiping on this run. If you're unaware, similar to the ZG Tiger boss, you have to kill all of these within a small period of time or else they self-heal. Dodge the dragon's fire breaths and just cleave everything down. Also, make sure you focus the bombs down when they're dropped by the chicken. One other note, if you're super low on mana or you just need some and you have a good amount of health, by clicking the buttons around the room, which you'll be using for Thermaplugg, you'll take a small amount of nature damage and not be able to click another button for 30 seconds, but you'll also get mana. You'll see me utilize this a few times. I think I have to cast an Innervate on one of my healers, and because Innervate takes you out of form, sometimes when my healers really need it and I don't have the mana, I'm unable to shift back into cat or bear to then continue doing damage. So you can use that as an opportunity to hit a button and then reshift. There's plenty of other reasons you'd use it. A lot of healers just use it on cooldown, but I'll explain more about the buttons for the next boss.
Interrupt.
Once the bosses go down, make sure you run to the corners of the room or else you'll pull Thermaplugg. My group just likes to go to the door and then we start drinking and immediately go back into it. In 2 minutes, 1 minute.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thermaplugg has 4 phases. Throughout every phase, your team has to be cognizant of when bombs come out of these bomb droppers where the buttons are located. This is where those buttons come in. By clicking the button, you shut off the bombs from dropping. Typically, you just want to delegate a caster to one of these areas, and if they have a 30-second debuff from hitting one of the buttons, they just have to call out in Discord that someone else needs to cover them. Something I haven't mentioned is always try to keep Fairy Fire on your target. It doesn't cost anything other than a global cooldown, and it is very helpful to your raid. When you've gotten him down to about 50%, give or take a few, he'll walk to the middle of the room and reset, getting ready for the next phase. Phase 2 is the Frost phase. A lot of people like to cast free action potions here. I don't personally think they're necessary, but they do help a bit. Keep an eye on the stacks of the debuff that you have. The higher they are, the worse it gets for you, but there are a lot of ways of getting rid of it. Some examples include your PvP trinket, Powershifting, Gnome Racial, getting Blessing of Freedom by a Paladin, so on and so forth. It's like getting rid of Shadowy Chains from Kelris. Yep. There you go. Phase 3 is nature damage, and the only really big thing that you have to worry about is getting a kick on his interruptible ability. If you don't, it's a raid-wide wipe.
Interrupt.
Not sure what I was thinking there, but I never used bombs on this fight, and I also didn't have the mana to reshift, so here's me doing the walk of shame to the button so that I can get back into cat form. The last phase is everything everywhere all at once. Be cognizant of all the mechanics, keep an eye on the bombs, and this time you have to bring them all the way down to 0%.
Interrupt.
Once the mech is down, the actual Thermaplugg will pop out with very little health, finish him off, and you finish the clear. 20 minute, 15 seconds, everybody. That's how you do it. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. The exciting thing about this run is how imperfect it was. We already can pinpoint so many areas to improve, and that's what I find so fun about speedrunning or parsing in general. It's a mini game of constant iterations of slight improvements to see how you compare to yourself previously. I still have all my normal guides coming out, so stay tuned, and if you want to hang out with me live, throw my Twitch channel a follow. Hope you guys are enjoying your weekend. It's time for me to tank on my rogue in 20 minutes, so I'm out of here. Peace.